Hi, welcome to Talking Books and Stuff, the program that talks all about books and writing and stuff. Here's your host, Dennis Rimmer.
Hello again, it's Talking Books and Writing and Stuff, and today we're talking with Halifax-based author H. Paul Doucette. He's based in Halifax. He's with BWL Publishing and perhaps some other outfits out there that we don't yet know about. So, Paul Doucette, how's things out your way these days with COVID and all that stuff?
Oh, it's as frustrating here as it is everywhere else.
Exactly.
But we're doing well. We're doing well, and probably from all indications, we're doing better than the rest of Canada. We're kind of back into a lockdown again for another 2 weeks.
Yeah, same here. So, we'll hope it clears up sometime soon. We get vaccinations and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one.
Yeah, okay. So you bill yourself as H. Paul Doucette. Is that because your middle name is Paul, or how'd that come about?
Well, my first name is Harry, and it's named after my father. But as a kid growing up, the parents decided that we would just go with Paul rather than confuse the issue at home.
Okay.
With there being two Harrys, and they weren't, fortunately, too crazy about calling me Junior. So.
Oh, that's good. Who wants to be called Junior, especially when you're?
Yeah, especially at 72.
Right. So, looking a bit at your bio, you had kind of a varied life before you settled down to be a writer. You were a merchant seaman for a while and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was born 3 years after the end of the war, and I grew up in probably what was then the poorest part of the city, next to Africville, and in those days, it was expected in most families that the eldest would get as much education as he or she could get between 15 and 16 years of age, and then go out to work. So my parents signed permission papers, and I left home just before 16 to go into the Canadian Army, which lasted about a year and a bit, and then I took an honorable discharge and shipped out as a merchant seaman.
So that take you pretty much everywhere?
Not quite. I did that for about 12 years. I finished my career at sea at about the time that containerization was coming into its own. And I went to sea with the old romantic notion of life at sea. It was tramp shipping and the like. That was rapidly disappearing in favor of the containerization. And I finished my career as a second mate and went to work for a German company at the time, and as an international freight forwarder. And in the course of over 15 years, 16 years with them, I developed my career to the point where I was an industrial logistics specialist, specializing in the logistics and transportation requirements to move things like oil refineries and power plants from one country to another.
That must have been quite the challenge, to say the least.
Yeah, to say the least. But the rewarding part of it, of course, was that it sent me all over the world. My last in the last years in my tenure in that profession took me to Russia 3 times. Once before the wall came down, and twice after, where I did a number of studies. One of which was the Russian railroad system from St. Petersburg to Vladivostok.
Oh, so that's pretty much across the whole country.
Yeah, it was the whole country. Yeah.
Wow. So then what prompted you to get into the writing business?
The writing business?
Writing, yes.
Yeah.
Books.
Well, I've always been artistic. I've always had a very strong artistic component to my personality or to who I am. But when I was much younger in the 50s and 60s, I had to make a choice between struggling artist or paying the rent and feeding myself. So I chose the latter and, of course, went to work.
Yep.
Then I've always wanted to write. And over the course of the years, I've written 2 chapbooks of poetry and a number of essays. And then I finally met and married the probably the most important woman at that time in my life. And fortunately, she passed away. And so shortly after that, I decided that I was now in a position to retire, which I was long overdue to want to do, because I was pretty burned out from the work,
right,
from the traveling.
Mm-hmm.
And I pursued a career initially as a fine art photographer, using the large format camera system, the 4x7 negatives and 8x10 negatives.
Right.
And but then my eyes started to act up, and I had to give that up.
Oh no!
So that led me into the books.
So, what was the first actual mystery book that you came up with?
My first book was a book called Unfinished Business. It was set just after the Second World War, and it was a one-off. It involved a character who was an MP at the end of the war, and he and his partner had broken up a major black market ring in Marseille, and then that's the backstory. And then he leaves the army to try his hand at a cop, being a police officer in Brooklyn, and they didn't like that, so he ended up hanging out his own shingle, became a private eye, and then his past came back to haunt him, and that was the basis of the story. After that, I found a publisher for that, and she was really impressed. It was down in Minnesota, and she was really impressed with my writing and my storytelling, and so that encouraged me to keep going. And I wrote a 7-part series with a PI set in Greenwich Village in the 1960s, and followed by a 3-part series set in the Pacific during the Second World War with a counterintelligence agent in the Pacific, and now I'm into this new series set in Halifax during the Second World War. I have 4 stories in that one, and I'm currently writing the 5th.
And this is H. Paul Doucette we're talking with, and that leads me to my next question about the Detective John Robichaux mysteries. So right now I'm reading Murder on the Docks. So how many Robichaux do we have in the series now then?
Well, in print right now 4, and I'm writing the 5th. Murder on the Docks is the 2nd in the series. The first one is Dead Man in the Harbor. And then the 3rd is called The Evil Men Do. And the 4th is The Body in Room 104.
And tell us a little bit about Detective John Robichaux. Who is he, and why is he hunting down murderers in Halifax?
He's a fictional character. All the stories are fictional. The cases that I write about are all fictional, but the environment that they take place in isn't. They're all historically correct. I do a lot of research on my stories beforehand. But with the Robichaux books, Robichaux is a Cape Bretoner who left at the latter stages of the First World War and served overseas. And then when the war was over, he ended up in Boston with a friend of his, and they both joined the Boston Police Department. After several years there, he decided to come home, and because he had a flair for police work, he was hired and sought a job at the Halifax Police Department and was hired. And he worked his way up to detective.
And we've got the mysteries now that are set in and around the Halifax area. Talking now with H. Paul Doucette. So, like I said, the one I'm looking at is Murder on the Docks. And it's all about smuggling and hijacking and nefarious goings-on in especially eastern Port Halifax, seeing how busy it was in the Second World War. So that kind of stuff actually went on. I'm kind of surprised to hear that we Canadians aren't as pure as we think we are.
No, Halifax has the dubious distinction of being very prominent in history, in latter-day history, in the 20th century, as being a key focal point for convoys in both the First and Second World Wars. So that would, of course, have come to the attention of the Germans, because it's in their interest to find out, where the convoys are originating and when they sail and so on and so forth, for obvious reasons.
Yes, and then so there were spies and things like that going on in Halifax, more so than we probably realize. Yes,
there were. Actually, there was. The military intelligence in Halifax was quite prominent in both wars.
So, of course, with the convoys, like we had that big explosion in Halifax in 1917, and then of course, in the Second World War, that's where all the, like you said, the convoys and the corvettes were based, and they went back and forth. So, what was the atmosphere like? Can you paint us a picture of how Halifax was in the 40s, in the war years? Is it a wide-open, rip-roaring town, or what was it like?
Well, interestingly enough, Halifax was in between the wars and prior to the wars, was a relatively poor city. It was just a rough and tumble seaport on the Canadian Atlantic seaboard. But during the war, they rose to prominence because of their position and geographical position in terms of being able to get convoys to England. Now, mind you, because of my age, obviously I was not alive for the war. But ironically, Halifax was pretty much the same from 1945 to about 1957-58, when it began to make its transition under the influences of the coming decades of the 60s and 70s. So I grew up in the city with a lot of the things that were still functioning and operating and so on and so forth, as did in the war years, with the exception of the congregation of ships at Bedford Basin. It was still a very busy seaport. So there were a lot of foreign national flag ships in the harbor.
Is it as busy these days as it was then? Or is Halifax as busy a port? Not so much?
Not so much. Again, you have to go back to what I said earlier about my days as a merchantman. With the advent of containerization, tramp shipping and cargo shipping, general cargo shipping, basically died off.
Gotcha.
So in Halifax, we got 2 container terminals, as opposed to 8, 10, 12 commercial cargo berths that were there when I was a kid growing up.
So yes, things have changed a bit. I'm impressed, H. Paul Doucette, with especially in the Murder on the Docks that I'm reading, the snappy dialogue you have in there. It kind of like 40s movies. Is that kind of like the feel you were going for?
Yeah, exactly. One of the most frequent comments I get about my work or my writing style is from people who read the books, is that they really like the dialogue. And many times I've heard it said that they felt like they were in the room.
Yes, exactly.
Because their ears were already attuned to the dialects.
Right, and so how did this writing style evolve? Like, what's the trick to writing good dialogue, I guess? Because a lot of writers, I think, get bogged down trying to make speeches instead of just the way people would actually talk.
good ears.
Good ears. Are you a musician as well?
No, no, but I do have a high appreciation of music.
Yep.
However, but no, you need a good ear for dialogue, for dialect, for accents, for the way people speak. As you have to listen to the way they speak as much as you listen to what they're saying.
So it's like you said,
for example, with the Matt Murphy mysteries, the Greenwich Village stories, the people who've read those many times have said, that they felt like they were in Brooklyn.
And that's a sort of a unique place in the world as well. So yeah, you got to have a good ear for that kind of stuff. H. Paul Doucette is with us today, and Detective John Robichaux mysteries, Jack Riley mysteries. What about those? Tell us about those.
Well, the Jack Riley is the one-off. That's the first book I wrote. That
was it. Oh, so there's no more Jack Riley out there.
I'm thinking of resurrecting him sometime maybe next year. Try another story with him. But as of right now, it was my first story. It was the one I tested the waters with.
Gotcha. Well, and you first time out, and you got a publisher, so that's pretty good.
Well, there was a lot of rejections before that publisher.
Of course. What kind of writing routine do you have? Like, is it every day, a certain amount of hours, or what do you do?
Yeah, to me, writing is, I have the discipline of having been a professional in a profession. And I treat writing as a craft and also as a job. I write every morning, even if it's only one page. I edit in the afternoon, but I write every day when I can. When you can.
What do you do for fun when you're not writing?
Oh, my interests are a little bit varied. I enjoy dancing. I enjoy going for short drives around the province, rediscovering the place where I live.
And what you're working on right now, you said your fifth Robichaux mystery?
Yeah, I'm writing a new one now. It's called The Man from Norway.
And speaking of publishing, BWL Publishing, how did you contact them, or did they contact you?
No, I unfortunately ended up parting ways with my first publisher, the American publisher, and took back all the rights to my books, and then I had to start selling myself again. And so I went online and found a number of publishers that were interested in the genres and the writing that I was doing. So I submitted an American-based story and a Canadian-based story to BWL, and they really liked both, but they really Canadian authors with stories set in Canada.
Right. So one thing led to another, and here you are.
And here I am. Yeah, and I've been with them now for I think 4 years, 4 or 5 years.
Good. So they're good people to work with?
Yes, I'm satisfied with them. It's a slow process of becoming established, becoming known, gathering a following and an audience.
Oh yeah.
As all authors and all artists have to, that's the price they pay. That's the price they have to pay to continue doing what they want to do.
Right. H. Paul Doucette, actually, I'm sorry I have to wrap it up now, but what words of advice would you have for, would-be authors, would-be writers out there? What's the best thing you can tell them?
The best thing I would suggest to them would be to tell them what worked for me. I once had an English professor while I was at college whose mantra was, write what you know.
Yep.
If you're going to write mysteries and detective stories, then read mysteries and detective stories. And that would be my second recommendation, would be read authors in the genre you want to write in. Find the ones that you respond to, you can identify with, their writing style, and study it. In my case, it led to my writing style, which is basically dialogue driven. It's not narrative driven. I want my characters to be the story. I don't want to be, as the author, I don't want to be an invisible entity with a voice telling you the story. So I want the characters to tell you the story. People like Robert Parker, for example, with the Spencer novels, the Jesse Stone novels, those are prime examples of dialogue-driven stories. A number of my books have received some very favorable reviews, I think primarily because of the fact that they were dialogue-driven stories. In fact, I've been compared. One of my stories have been compared to Mickey Spillane.
Well,
style of writing.
That's pretty good company.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Paul, and continued good luck.
And you as well. And I hope everyone stays healthy and well with you, and stay safe.
All right.
Thank you for visiting with us today. This is Talking Books and Stuff with Dennis Rimmer. Contact him at dennis@talkingbooks.tk. Thank you, and may all the good news be yours. Oh, and don't forget to check out his book, The Great Canadian Notebook, available across Canada and at amazon.ca.